Welcome back to Hollywood Today. In this segment, we're diving into Harry and what's really unfolding right now. There is a big claim floating around that he's out here aiming for a massive $1 million per speech. That number definitely grabbed attention. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle isn't even doing solo photos. She's basically saying, oh, you'll get a group shot after people paid $3,200. One group picture, that's it. It's the kind of bold move that gets people talking instantly. But now, turn your focus to Melbourne this week because the atmosphere there tells a completely different story. Ticket sales are barely moving, and despite all the buildup, the venue still looks half empty. That thing isn't lining up, and people are beginning to notice. Right now, Harry is in Australia, moving through what his team is calling a major speaking tour. The headline event is a workplace mental health summit in Melbourne. On paper, it sounds solid. Big venue, 2-day lineup, industry professionals, everything polished and put together. But once you look beyond the surface, the numbers start revealing a very different picture. Well, you've got to hand it to Meghan. If nothing else, she's persistent. Somehow she's even managed to tap into the Mexican community, pushing narratives in her favor while trying to discredit critics. Meanwhile, ticket prices didn't just drop, they plummeted. Starting at $2,400, then down to $2,000, then cut again to $1,000, and now sitting at just $500 for online access. That's 4 separate price reductions for a single event centered around one speaker. And behind all of this is one key figure that explains everything. $1 million. That's reportedly what Harry was aiming to earn per speech when he first entered this space. It made headlines and was never firmly denied. Now compare that to Melbourne, where reports suggest he's bringing in closer to $50,000, from $1 million down to $50,000, and still struggling to fill seats. That kind of gap is huge, and it's raising serious questions about what's really happening behind the scenes. At the same time, with his father dealing with cancer, some feel the situation only adds more tension, especially as they continue pursuing paths they were advised against. It's hard not to sympathize with the royal family. It can seem like they've lost control of the situation. This isn't a gradual adjustment. It's a steep drop. We're talking about nearly a 95% decrease in just a few years. That kind of decline doesn't go unnoticed. And even after all the heavy discounts, the audience still isn't showing up in full. The contrast between the image being presented and the reality on the ground is becoming harder to ignore, and more people are starting to question everything. Kinsey Schofield didn't hold back this week. She said it plainly, Harry isn't drawing the crowd his team expected, and that's not just speculation. It's clearly reflected in the ticket sales. The numbers are speaking loudly, and they're not looking good. The earlier event in Washington already set the tone. Tickets were priced at $1,800. Expectations were high, and attendees walked in anticipating something impactful. But according to those who were there, the reaction was confusion. Some critics say Meghan hasn't been able to separate from royal roles, describing it as more of a cosplay royal tour. Others point to deeper concerns, suggesting ongoing tension with the monarchy. One attendee summed it up bluntly, a what the heck? There was no deep research, no clear solutions, no strong data, just personal viewpoints shared with a paying audience. People paid premium prices expecting real value, not surface-level commentary, and that disappointment is starting to spread quickly. Now Melbourne seems to be following the exact same pattern. This doesn't look like bad timing or a one-off situation. It's beginning to resemble a consistent trend. And people are definitely picking up on it. The original strategy was straightforward. Position Harry as a high-value speaker, placing him alongside global leaders and respected experts. But that kind of pricing demands authority, real insight, and something truly unique. Something people can't get elsewhere. There was a time when, after stepping away from the British royal family, he was reportedly asking for $1 million per speech. Now, it's becoming clear that expectation isn't holding up, especially given what audiences are actually hearing. So the big question keeps getting louder every time this happens. Does the content justify the cost? Washington raised concerns. Melbourne is raising even more. And this is exactly where things start to crack in a very visible way. Each event seems to follow the same pattern, and audiences are catching on quickly. Harry takes the stage, grabs the mic, and ends up focusing heavily on his own story, which is where things begin to feel off for people expecting more. Because here's the issue: audiences are coming in expecting meaningful insight, real expertise, and practical takeaways they can actually use. Instead, what they're getting feels more like a personal narrative than a professional analysis. And even Meghan Markle hasn't been able to sell $300 tickets. That gap hits hard, and each time it happens, the next booking seems to fall even further, dropping from that $1 million expectation all the way down to around $50,000. And that kind of shift is raising serious questions. This isn't a minor adjustment, it's a sharp downward slide. 4 separate price cuts, and still seats remain empty. That's not a short-term dip. It's a clear trend. It's moving fast in one direction. Call it the $1 million gap, the difference between what was once expected and what's actually being paid now. A 95% drop in just a few years is huge, and at this point, it's impossible to ignore. But here's where it becomes even more striking. Even at $50,000, tickets across multiple tiers are still struggling to sell, and that says a lot. Some critics have started questioning whether Harry should be positioned as a leading voice in mental health at all, pointing out that he's not formally an expert in that field. That contrast is starting to stand out more and more. It suggests that the real demand might be even lower than what's being negotiated behind closed doors. And that kind of disconnect doesn't go unnoticed for long. Then there's the part that really makes people pause. The same person speaking about workplace mental health has reportedly experienced a steady stream of staff departures within his own organization. Reports claim around 25 employees have left since 2020, and that's not a small number. It raises real questions that are hard to ignore. Staff turnover, a major drop in speaking fees, and venues that still aren't filling up all combine into a picture that's becoming increasingly difficult to explain away. The topic on stage is workplace well-being, yet the contrast behind the scenes stands out in a big way. It leaves people wondering who exactly this message is meant for and whether it truly aligns with what's happening off stage. Now, go back to what some are calling the DC precedent. Tickets were priced at $1,800 per seat. Expectations were extremely high, and attendees walked in expecting meaningful insight worth the cost. But based on reactions, the content didn't live up to the price at all. There was no deep research, no structured solutions, just personal opinions shared with a room full of paying guests. And that disconnect didn't go unnoticed. Here's the key point: none of this appeared out of nowhere. Each appearance has followed the same pattern, and it's becoming harder to overlook. No in-depth studies, no strong data, no layer breakdowns. Just a repeated focus on personal experiences every time. That repetition is starting to stand out more clearly, and people are catching on fast. So now the central question keeps getting louder. If audiences are paying for expertise but leaving with something else entirely, what exactly are organizers promising when they book these events? Because there's a clear gap between expectation and delivery. Then there's another layer, adding even more attention. While one side is speaking to partially filled venues, reports suggest Meghan is preparing to launch a private members club in Australia tied to Soho House. And that contrast is turning heads. This is an exclusive application-based network built around status and selective access. And the shift is hard to miss. They stepped away from one of the most recognized institutions in the world, known for its exclusivity and structure, only to now be associated with a completely different kind of elite circle. People are definitely noticing the transition, It's a change that stands out. From global speaking stages to private member spaces, the direction feels different, and there's growing curiosity about what it all means and where it's heading next. Originally, this was a 2-day summit price close to $2,400, with another tier around $2,000. But now, an additional tier has been introduced at $1,000 just to attend in person. And for those who prefer streaming, access is now available for about $500. That alone signals something important. It's a clear sign that ticket sales aren't hitting the targets they expected. Now things take an even sharper turn. This isn't just about pricing or attendance anymore. It's about perception, how the public is starting to see everything differently. The image that was once being built no longer fully matches what people are seeing, and that gap is becoming harder to ignore. There was a time when the pitch was simple: a high-value speaker positioned alongside global leaders offering insight you couldn't find anywhere else. That was the expectation people bought into. But now the reaction is shifting and growing louder with each event. Again and again, the same feedback keeps surfacing. People walk in expecting depth, structure, and real guidance, and leave questioning what they actually heard. Some responses are blunt, with attendees reportedly saying things like, wasn't what I expected. And that kind of reaction is spreading quickly, which leads to the question many are now asking: where was the actual advice? Those words land hard, and they travel fast across online discussions and reactions. And here's the uncomfortable reality about the speaking industry: reputation moves faster than any marketing push. Once that shift begins, it's incredibly difficult to contain. Single underwhelming event might be overlooked, sure, but when it starts turning into a pattern, that's when it becomes impossible to ignore. Organizers begin picking up on it. Audiences grow more cautious. Ticket buyers stop rushing in and instead hold back, waiting to see if it's actually worth it. That sense of urgency that once drove high ticket prices and packed venues starts fading little by little, and it's all happening in plain sight. Spending thousands just to hear Meghan Markle talk about business or how to live your best life is something critics are questioning more openly now. Some point out inconsistencies, saying her own ventures haven't exactly shown strong results. Products haven't been consistently released, and certain deals haven't lived up to expectations. So naturally, people are starting to ask, who is really paying for that kind of advice? Then comes the bigger issue: credibility. When someone is presented as an authority, the expectation is straightforward: deliver value. Offer something practical. Share insights people can actually apply in real life. Without that, the entire setup begins to crack. And right now, that crack seems to be widening with each event. Bookings may still be happening and events are still being scheduled, but the energy feels different. There's less excitement, more skepticism, less demand, more hesitation from audiences who are paying closer attention than before. You can feel the shift happening in real time, and it's getting harder to ignore. This isn't just about one speech or one location anymore. It's about momentum, whether it's building or slowly slipping away. And if this pattern continues, the next phase might not just mean lower fees or smaller crowds. It could bring a much bigger question into focus: what happens if the stage itself starts to fade? Right now, that question is sharper than ever. Was this really the step forward they were aiming for? Or is this what remains after everything else didn't work out? That question is becoming harder to avoid, and more people are starting to ask it openly. Just look at the comparison. It speaks for itself. Catherine, Princess of Wales, built her early years initiative on a foundation of real research. That groundwork matters. Data was gathered, studies were published, and findings were shared openly for people to understand. When she speaks, there's structure, intention, and something tangible the audience can take away and apply. It's not centered on her personally. The work itself carries the message, and that approach stands out clearly. Now compare that to what's unfolding in Melbourne. A reported $50,000 appearance, multiple ticket price reductions, and still a venue that isn't filled. That alone raises questions. There's no research presented in advance, no data previewed, no clear framework outlined before taking the stage. That difference becomes obvious immediately, and people are noticing it quickly. One side builds content, the other leans on appearances, and the market is reacting in real time. The gap between those approaches is becoming more visible with every event. But here's where things shift again. There hasn't been any clear response to any of this. And that silence is starting to stand out more than anything else. No explanation for the repeated ticket price cuts. No detailed preview of what's being offered to justify the remaining cost. That silence is becoming noticeable, and people are paying closer attention to it than ever. There's also been no pushback against the criticism. No attempt to reshape the narrative or redirect the conversation. Just quiet. And that stands out, especially considering how quickly responses used to come from the same team in the past. The contrast is clear. Statements used to be immediate. Reactions were sharp. Criticism was addressed quickly and directly. But now, when it comes to pricing, attendance, and audience feedback, nothing. At this point, the silence is speaking louder than words ever could, and people are interpreting it in their own ways. The original message was bold. The idea was to step outside the traditional path, expand reach, and create a larger, more meaningful impact. That was the promise, and it was heard clearly. But now, fast forward to today, and the picture looks very different. A venue that isn't full, no clearly defined expertise laid out ahead of time. Ticket prices cut again and again, from $1 million expectations down to a fraction of that. And that kind of shift doesn't go unnoticed. It changes how everything is viewed moving forward. The platform is still there, that much is clear, but the value attached to it is being questioned now more than ever. And while all of this is unfolding, there are also reports of separate appearances and exclusive experiences happening elsewhere, adding yet another layer to the story that people are watching closely. That contrast doesn't go unnoticed. Same names, same level of visibility, but the public reaction feels completely different this time. What once started with massive expectations is now shifting toward uncertainty, and that change is becoming harder to ignore. The shift is obvious, and people are paying close attention to every move being made, and this trip isn't over yet. Whatever happens when the next audience shows up, no matter the size, it won't stay quiet for long. Reactions spread quickly, and right now, every moment carries more weight than ever. Then things take another turn. The focus moves away from headlines, pricing, and speculation, and straight into what actually happens inside the room where it matters most. Because the real test begins the moment the speaker steps on stage. That's where everything is decided in real time. All the promotion, all the positioning, all the buildup, it all comes down to one thing: what the audience actually experiences while sitting there and listening. And this is where the pressure really hits. People aren't walking in casually anymore, not like before. They're arriving with questions, with doubts, and with expectations shaped by everything they've already heard leading up to that moment. Some come in curious, others are skeptical, and some are simply waiting to see if this is the moment things finally shift. Because realistically, this is a turning point. If the content delivers, the message connects, if something meaningful and useful comes through, then the entire narrative could change quickly. And that possibility is exactly what makes this moment so important. It adds another layer to the story, and it's getting harder to overlook. Same name, same visibility, but a completely different reaction from the public this time around. What began with high expectations is now moving into uncertain territory, and people are noticing that shift as it happens. The change is clear, and attention is locked in on every detail. And again, this trip isn't finished. Whatever unfolds with the next audience, big or small, it won't stay contained. Reactions move fast, and every moment matters. Now things shift again, because the focus leaves behind headlines, ticket prices, and speculation, and lands directly on what happens inside that room, where everything counts. The real test starts the second the speaker steps on stage. That moment determines everything. All the buildup leads to one simple question: What does the audience actually walk away with? And that's where the pressure becomes real. People aren't showing up casually anymore. They're coming in with doubts, with questions, and with expectations shaped by everything leading up to that point. Some are curious, some are skeptical, and others are waiting to see if this is the turning point. Because this really is a defining moment if the content connects, if the message lands, if something genuinely valuable is delivered, the narrative could shift almost instantly. And that's what makes this moment so intense. One strong performance can change perception, rebuild interest, and bring momentum back in a major way. It only takes one moment to shift the tone and reshape how everything is seen. But if the same pattern repeats, that's where the real issue begins to grow. If audiences once again walk away feeling like they didn't get what they expected, that reaction won't stay in the room. It spreads, and it spreads fast. In today's world, it moves instantly across platforms and conversations. One comment becomes 10, 10 turn into hundreds, and before long, the entire narrative is shaped by those shared reactions. That's the real risk right now. This isn't about potential anymore. It's about what actually happens when it matters most. Not what could happen, but what really takes place when the spotlight is on and the stakes are higher than ever. Every word, every point, every second on that stage is being watched, judged, and remembered. Nothing goes unnoticed. Because right now, this isn't just another speaking engagement. It's something bigger. It's a full test, a test of value, a test of credibility, and a test of whether audiences still believe there's something worth showing up for. And once that moment passes, that's it. There's no editing it afterward, no rewriting it later, no second version to fix it. And then everything shifts to what happens after the event, because that's where the real impact shows up. Not the promotion, not the ticket pricing, not even the headlines, but what people actually walk away with once it's all over. That's what ends up defining everything moving forward. It's the reaction afterward that matters most. That's where things become clear. The conversations people have as they leave, the posts that start appearing online, the messages shared between attendees, that's where the real story begins to unfold in real time. Because people talk, they compare experiences, they share honest opinions, and they don't hold back when something falls short of expectations. If the experience feels worthwhile, that energy spreads quickly and builds momentum. But if it doesn't, that spreads even faster, and the impact hits harder than expected. And right now, that risk is front and center for everyone to see. This isn't happening in isolation either. Each event builds on the one before it, and every reaction adds another layer to the bigger picture. Over time, those layers stack up and turn into a reputation that becomes difficult to shift once it's set. And that's when things get serious. That's how momentum works. It either builds or it breaks. There's rarely a middle ground for long. And here's the key point people can't overlook. In this space, value isn't decided by titles or past recognition alone. It's decided by the audience in real time. Their response is what truly counts. They're the ones who decide if something is worth it, if it delivers, and if it's worth recommending to others. No audience, no momentum, no strong reaction, no real demand. It really is that simple when you break it down. So now all attention turns to what comes next, and the pressure is rising quickly. Will the reaction shift the narrative? Will people walk away saying it exceeded expectations, or will the same concerns continue to surface again and again? Because at this stage, it's no longer about promises. It's about results, real outcomes people can see and feel. And those outcomes are what determine the direction moving forward. Everything now depends on what happens next. This is the moment where the path becomes clear for everyone watching. The buildup is done. Expectations are already set, and many in the audience have already formed opinions before even stepping into the room. If the delivery finally matches the promise, everything can change quickly. Doubt can turn into support. Hesitation can turn into demand, and the entire narrative can shift almost overnight. That's how fast perception moves when people feel they've received something genuinely valuable. But if it doesn't land, if the same reactions continue, then the pattern becomes even more fixed. And that's where things become much harder to reverse. At that point, it's no longer just about a single event, it becomes the expectation moving forward. And that's a difficult position to be in because then it's not about building excitement anymore. It's about rebuilding trust. And that's a completely different challenge, one that takes time and effort to repair. So, this next phase isn't just important, it's critical. The pressure is at its highest right now. Every appearance, every stage, every message delivered from this point forward carries more weight than ever before. Because the story isn't finished yet, it's still unfolding in real time, and people are watching every move closely. The next reaction, the next audience response could be the moment that determines where everything goes from here. Right now, that direction is still taking shape. Each event adds another piece to the bigger picture, and people are paying close attention to see where it all leads. But if the reaction doesn't shift soon, this won't stay limited to just one tour or one appearance. It could start redefining the entire path ahead in a major way. And that kind of shift can happen faster than expected once the audience starts making the final call. That's the power of public reaction. It moves quickly, it doesn't hold back, and once it builds, it's incredibly difficult to turn around. If you made it this far, make sure to share your thoughts in the comments, pass this along, and subscribe for more updates.